Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing Ready or Not. This was directed by Matt Belenty-Elfin and Tyler Gillett and stars Samara Weaving, Adam Brody, Mark O'Brien and Andy McDowell, as well as a variety of others. The film really focuses on Grace, played by Samara Weaving, a young bride who ultimately marries into a rich and eccentric family. So it looks at how this particular night takes a sinister turn when the eccentric new in-laws force her to take part in a terrifying game. Ultimately hide and seek, but an extreme version of that. Look, overall this film was solid. I thought it was one of the better horror films that come out this year, and I liked what I saw here. This is kind of an interesting film. I like the idea that it involves. It reminded me a lot of You're Next in many ways, even down to the point that each film has an Australian actress playing the lead. Where You're Next really focuses on ultimately this horror outside trying to get in. And this film really focuses on this horror inside trying to get out. And that's sort of what it looks at. And both films sort of look at the idea of a young, woman coming into an eccentric and strange family. And this sort of takes it to the extreme. I like that there's rules set up in this for the honoured tradition of this game that they play. And it depends on the game that they choose to participate in. And some of them aren't extreme and simple, but one in particular is quite terrifying. That's the hide and seek game. I really liked the way it was shot. I liked the ideas that they were expressing in this film. I really liked the house. Once we're in the house, it sort of reminded me of a different time, like the 40s or the 50s or even the 20s in many ways. And we learn about this particular backstory on why this game is played and how it sort of began. And I really liked that aspect to it. I think all the acting's solid. But I think the real standouts here, Adam Brody, I think is fantastic. His sarcastic humour works really well, and he offers a lot of humour and sort of really dramatic scenes in this film, and I thought he was really great. Mark O'Brien, solid, playing Alex, Grace's husband, and I really like sort of what they do with him. And Andy McDowell's really great as well, playing a role that's sort of a bit different for her, and I really like that. But the real standout here is clearly Samara Weaving. This is a star-making film for her. She's an actress I've seen in a variety of things, playing bit parts, but this is her first sort of leading role, and I think she's fantastic in this, and she really shines. And she's sort of a character that starts off a bit scared and timid and shocked by what's happening, but ultimately becomes sort of a badass character, and a character that, due to things happen to her, she has to rise above and become strong and powerful and defeat the thing that's coming for her. And I really loved that. I think most of the writing's solid. I really liked sort of the first moment we get to meet Grace, Samara Weaving's character, and the interaction between her and Alex. I really like the scene that takes place here, the banter between them. You really learn a lot about the characters. There's some humorous moments in this small little sequence, and you learn a lot more about the characters than you would usually in these sort of movies. It starts with her sort of talking to herself in the mirror, which is really fantastic. She's in a wedding dress and she's got a cigarette in her mouth, and it's just, this scene is really great. You get a real sense of her internal thoughts and what's going on for her, and I really loved that, and I thought that was a great introduction to the character. And the ending is fantastic. The third act is really great. What transpires there, it doesn't quite go the way you expect, and it is quite shocking and surprising. I really liked that. It was sort of a refreshing take on a genre that's been sort of beaten to death. And that's, I think, the struggle with most horror movies these days. They've always got to make it interesting, unique, and they've got to do something different and rise above all the cliched ones we've had before. And this film really tries to do that. But there were some inventive ideas in it and some inventive death scenes that worked really well. Grace was a character we could really get behind and follow, and the things that happen to her. I like the fact that so much happens to her. She goes through a lot. She gets hurt in many ways. And that's sort of good in a way, I think, rather than having a character that sort of gets through things perfectly with nothing happening to them. This sort of film showed that things do happen to her. It sort of reminded me of the classic, heroine in horror films. It has to overcome something to become the hero. And this sort of has that. Look, there's stuff about this film I didn't like as much. The very first start sequence, that I didn't love as much because it sort of showed, the horror that's to come. And I just felt like we didn't need that. The scene that follows that, where we meet Grace and Alec, that to me is where the film should have began, in my opinion. It's like a lot of these horror films, a lot of the horror tropes, they have to start with the horror at the start. and then we introduced to the characters, and then the horror begins towards the end of the film. I just feel with a lot of filmmakers such as Ari Aster and Jordan Peele, we don't need to start with the horror straight away. We can be introduced to the characters. We can do a sort of Stephen King idea where we're introduced to the characters and the horror comes from that. And I thought this film could have really done that. But a lot of these movies really need to start with the horror so it draws the audience in, and I understand that. I think the film suffered halfway through. It sort of lagged and sagged a little bit. It felt like it didn't really know what to do or where to go. And it didn't quite know which tone to go with, whether a black comedy horror or a traditional horror. And it sort of went in and out of both. Some of the jokes hit, but a lot of them didn't. I didn't know if that was partly because of the audience I was with. It was a small crowd and they didn't quite get into it as much as a bigger crowd would have, I think. But a lot of the jokes did fall flat, and some of the jokes worked for some actors and some of the jokes didn't work for others. I felt a lot of the performances were over the top and a little much at times and needed to be reeled in a little bit. I know they were going for eccentric sort of characters, but I just felt it was a bit much in the decisions that actors were making for these particular characters. I think the ending makes up for all the other stuff I didn't quite like as much. I think it's a brilliant ending, and it sort of has this thing throughout the film whether if they don't try and kill this woman, will bad things happen to them? You know, is it just a traditional horror movie with these crazy, eccentric people trying to kill someone and sacrifice them? Or is there a much more sinister, supernatural element happening here? And that's sort of the line that this film follows, and I really liked that. I thought that was different, unique. Final thoughts. Look, if you like movies like You're Next, you'll probably like this. It's entertaining, it's fun at times, it has a bit of humour, but it's more of a sort of traditional horror in many ways, and I like that. But the real draw card to this film is Samara Weaving. I think she's absolutely fantastic, and she's an actress I think we're going to see a lot more of. I'm going to give Ready or Not 3.5 out of 5. It was a fun experience that I had with this film. It wasn't perfect, but it was still entertaining enough for me to draw something out of, and I enjoyed my experience with it. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.